Hello my amazing people, and welcome back to my channel. If you're back, if you are new, welcome to my channel. I am Shayna and I have another true crime case for you today. I give very standard disclaimers in all of my videos, but for this one I am making a special disclaimer because it is especially disturbing. If I'm honest, like, doing the research for this case freaked me out a little bit. Have you ever seen the movie Sinister? In that movie, in the beginning, there's a scene where a family is hanging from a tree and it's just really creepy music playing in the background. That is what this freaking case reminded me of. So I say all that to say that this is extremely disturbing and viewer discretion is advised. No.
Viewer discretion is advised.
So you've been warned. And when YouTube asks me if my videos are for children, I say no. So don't come for me, okay? But how is everyone doing today? I hope that you are having an amazing day so far. Thank you so much for joining me, and let's get started. So we are going back to Wilshire, Ohio in 1970. There are two high schoolers named Hal and Joan who are dating. And surprisingly, out of nowhere, they find out that Joan, who also goes by Jill, is pregnant. And their parents were not happy about this at all, but they were coming up on their high school graduation, and the two of them actually decided to just make it work and stay together for the sake of their baby. And they got married not long after that. They were two people who came from very humble beginnings. Their family were working class people, and Wilshire, Ohio was a really teeny tiny town. Like hundreds of people, and everyone knew each other. So the two of them lived in this town their whole lives. They didn't really see much outside of Wilshire, but they were happy, and they decided that they were going to start their life together and that they were going to raise a family together and work on a farm that was theirs. It was their own. It was going to be their bread and butter, the way that they were able to support their family. So Jill gives birth to Michelle, her first baby girl, in 1972, and then a second baby girl named Chrissy in 1974. And at this point, they felt like, Joe and Hal felt like their family was complete. And Joe and Hal were very happy together. I know that all of these stories start off like that, but this one actually starts and ends with the relationship between Joe and Hal never going sour, never going rotten. They were very happy together. And it was funny because the two of them were so opposite. They were polar opposites. Hal was really reserved and quiet and laid back, and Joe was lively and spontaneous and loud, and she liked dancing, and she would force Hal to dance to country music with her. They really leveled each other out. Joe brought Hal's energy up, inspired him, encouraged him to keep going, and Hal brought Joe to level ground sometimes. He was her grounding energy that she needed. So the two of them really were perfect for each other, and they were so happy to have a family, their little family, on their farm. And growing up, their girls were very happy. Michelle and Chrissy were similar to their parents in the regard that they were polar opposites. Michelle was really quiet, reserved, laid back. She was a tomboy. She just liked to do her own thing, and she had a very small group of friends that she was close to. And Chrissy was more bubbly and energetic, and she actually was really close to Hal. So her and her dad had a relationship like this. But the two girls both absolutely loved animals, and they liked their life on the farm. Similar to Joe and Hal, they didn't really know life outside of Wilshire. They didn't see any mountains or beaches in their life. They were really born, raised, and just lived and breathed this farm in Wilshire. So they were happy, their parents were happy, and over the years, things happen, right? Life happens to everyone. While things were pretty good for the most part, Joe kind of started to not be as happy. She was not only working on the farm, but she also picked up a second job where she was working night shifts. And we all know how demanding working on a farm can be. Maybe we don't all know, but it's pretty demanding. And she was a devoted mother too. So she had 2 jobs, 3 jobs if you include being a mother, and how he picked up most of the brunt work of the farm. He did most of the physical manual labor. He was the type of man who never really complained about anything though, so he just kind of kept his head down and worked. And the 2 girls for the most part were happy too. But Michelle had a really traumatic experience happen in her early teens that really shook her and also shook her family up and really just turned their world upside down. John Rogers was Hal's blood brother who actually lived on the farm in a trailer, and he would help out around the farm, and he spent time with the family. And while the kids were growing up, he was a great uncle to them, so everybody thought. But one day, after John and his girlfriend go through a breakup, she actually accuses him of sexually assaulting her, and she calls the police on him. When she calls the police, she very particularly tells them that not only did he assault her, he also recorded the entire ordeal, and he assaulted her at knife point. So the police come out, they are searching through his trailer, and of course they find all of the evidence of what she told them. They find the video proof that he actually did in fact assault her and threaten her. And not only do they find this, as they're rummaging through all of the recordings and the tapes that he has in his trailer, they also find videos and photos of another young girl who was blindfolded, who was seen in the video footage and heard in the video footage begging for her life, begging for him not to hurt her. And it is none other than Michelle. So when police find this, they of course notify Hal and Joe of exactly what was found in John's trailer. And Hal and Joe are completely just devastated because they can't believe that something like this was happening right under their nose for years. It went on for 3 years, and Michelle never told them because John threatened that if she told anyone, he would kill her. You have to remember that Michelle and Chrissy grew up in such a small, sheltered kind of life that they didn't really know who would help them and who wouldn't help them. It was really just her and her family on this farm. That was really all that she knew. So for her uncle to threaten her and hurt her and say that he would kill her for if she ever said anything, she took what he said and believed it, and really believed that she could not go and get help. So Hal and Joe are dealing with the exhaustion of the farm. They find out about this terrible thing that happens to their daughter, and they are just like devastated, and it really took a toll on them for years. And in 1989, Michelle is 17 at the time, and Chrissy is 14 at the time. And Joe is like, we need a vacation. Like, it's been a rough few years for us. I feel like it has really taken a toll on us. We need time as a family to go and get away. So Hal, being the hardworking man that he is, says, you go take a girls trip with the girls. I'll stay back and hold down the farm. And Joe tells the girls, we're on a budget, so be mindful, but I will let you decide where you guys want to go. Tell me where you want to go, where you want to vacation. I'll let you plan most of the trip, but just be aware that we have a very tight budget. But Michelle and Chrissy are just so excited because they've never seen anything, like I said, in the world before. But they decided they want to go to Florida. Now, the drive from Ohio to Florida is very long, but Joe agreed. She said, my girls deserve it. I'm going to do this for them. On May 26th of 1989, Joe, Michelle, and Chrissy set off on their 1,000-mile journey down to Florida. They go in Joe's Oldsmobile and they hit the road, and they drive the first 500 miles and they end up stopping in Georgia for a break. After the first 8 hours of driving, Joe sets them up in a motel and they go to sleep, and she decides that the next morning they will wake up and finish the rest of the trip. So they wake up the next morning and their first stop is the Jacksonville Zoo once they get down to Florida. And Joe actually sends Hal a postcard on May 29th and basically just tells him that the girls are dragging her around, but it does have a light and happy tone to the postcard. But they spend their first couple days sightseeing. They go to Disney World, they go to SeaWorld. They are going all over the place. On Thursday, June 1st, they are ready to leave Orlando and head to Tampa for the next leg of their trip. And they do just that. They pack up the things in their luggage and they get in the vehicle and go down to Tampa. And once they actually make it into Tampa, Joe pulls over on the side of the road to pull up the directions of exactly where she's going. She's staying at the Days Inn with her girls and she needs to figure out how exactly to get there from where she's at. So as Joe is sitting on the side of the road, a man walks up. He notices that there's this car with Ohio plates. They're in Florida. Sitting on the side of the road, seems like women who might need some assistance, and he's a local. So he walks up to the car and he says, "Hey, do you ladies need any directions? I can definitely point you in the right direction." And Joe's like, "Oh my goodness, yes, thank you so much. That's exactly what I need, our directions. Can you tell me how to get to the Days Inn at Rocky Point?" And the man is like, "Of course, absolutely. It's right this way." He actually takes a brochure that Joe has in her vehicle and writes down the directions for her. And when he hands them back to her, she says, "Thank you so much." And he says, "Absolutely. Hey, I hear, you told me that you are traveling, that you're in town. I have a boat. If you guys want to come out with me tonight, we can watch the sunset and I can take you out on the water. How does that sound?" And Joe and Michelle and Chrissy are like, "Yeah, sure. That actually sounds like a really fun idea." And they say, "Why not?" So he explains to her how to get to the loading dock where his boat will be, and she writes down on another brochure that she has a blue and white boat. So she knows that when it is time to go down and meet him, she's going to be looking for a blue and white boat. And she says thank you. She goes to the hotel. They check in. We don't know exactly what they spend the day doing, but they wind up having dinner in the hotel restaurant around 7:30, and they go back up to their rooms. Joe snaps a couple pictures of the view from their motel, as well as a picture of Michelle sitting on the floor in the hotel room. And then they set off down to the boat where the nice man is going to be located waiting for them. And where the man tells Joe that the boat is going to be is actually only a mile from the hotel. So after they eat dinner, they get in the car and start driving down to the boat launch where it's supposed to be at. And at this time, it's about 8:30, 9 o'clock. It is a beautiful orange sunset setting in Tampa, and they are just floored and thrilled by the beautiful view that they have and the fact that they're going to be on a boat for probably the first time in their life. A few days later, on the morning of June 4th, there are some people in their boats that are enjoying the beautiful morning that it is. It's a warm day, and they notice that something is floating in the water a little ways down. It's bobbing up and down, so they go to check it out. And when they get closer, they make the grim discovery that this is actually a person that's floating in the water. So they call for the assistance of the authorities, and the Coast Guard comes out. When the Coast Guard arrives, they discover that it is a woman who is most likely younger in age, and she is dead. She has her hands tied behind her back, as well as a long rope hanging from her neck. And as they're pulling her out of the water, they're trying to figure out why it's hard for them to pull her up. And they realize that there is a 30-pound cinder block weight tied to the other end of the rope that's around this woman's neck. So they cut the rope, they pull her up to safety, not to safety, but they pull her up into the boat, and they're on their way back to the shore when they get another call that there has been another sighting of a body about 2 miles down from where the first one was located. And then just a few minutes after that, they get another call that there's a third body located less than a quarter mile from the second. The other two bodies also were in the same condition, with their hands tied behind their back as well as duct tape over their mouths. And they also had the rope around their neck with a cinder block, at least 30 pounds, tied to the other end of it. Investigators were really starting from nothing with identifying who these 3 women were, and that is because partially they didn't have any identification on them. And in addition to this, there had been no missing persons reports in Tampa in the last weeks. So they were starting from nothing. They knew that these women were most likely tourists, and they wound up getting the autopsy done by the medical examiner, and the medical examiner found that they were in the water for at least 3 to 5 days. They most likely were sexually assaulted, as the bottom half of them were all gone. They had no pants on, but they did have tops on. Due to the heat in Tampa, their bodies had decomposed so rapidly that their bodies bloated and pulled them up to the surface, even with the cinder blocks that were tied around their necks. So they had decomposed so quickly because of the heat in Florida, and that contributed to them floating up and being found. She also noted that there was absolutely no DNA evidence, no proof of fingerprints of who might have done this to them, because they were in the water for so long, so decomposed. Anything that would have been on them, DNA or fingerprint wise, would have been washed away. The police called on the University of South Florida to aid in figuring out exactly where the women were initially dropped into the water. And that might seem like something that's impossible to do, but they actually were able to figure out, based on the currents and where their bodies were found, that they were placed in the bay from the middle of the bay, not from a loading dock or a bridge or something on the outside, like an outside kind of landmark. They were placed in the water from within the middle of the bay. So the police knew that someone dropped them out there from a boat. The media picked up on this story pretty quick because of how taboo it was, and the fact that there was so many unanswered questions. Nobody had heard of any missing people, and these bodies just show up half naked floating in the bay with cinder blocks around their necks. Like, it was something that was so disturbing for everyone to hear about. So the media really grabbed onto this story and ran with it. It was everywhere. But what was crazy is that nobody knew who these women were. On June 8th, the employee who worked in the hotel at the Days Inn where they were staying noticed that time had gone by and they hadn't been in the room. The bags that they had were in the same exact places they were on the first day. They hadn't used any towels in the room. They haven't slept in the bed. So the employee who goes in to kind of, do the replenishing of supplies and making the beds and all of that good stuff, went to her manager and notified her manager that it had been about a week before anyone, or a week since anyone had been or used this hotel room. And the manager noted in their mind, like, yeah, I actually haven't seen them since they checked in. I haven't seen Joan, Michelle, or Chrissy since they checked in. So the two of them actually decided to call the police, and the police find out that the room is registered under Joan's name, find out Joan Rogers is married to Hal Rogers, and they contact him all the way back in Ohio. Now, at this point, they were due to be back home 3 days prior, and Hal hadn't reached out to any of the police to ask them if there was anything going on. He had no way of really contacting them via phone, but he also just didn't call authorities to make sure that everything was okay. But they did contact him, and they asked him for their dental records of his 2 daughters and his wife so that they could compare it to the bodies found in the bay. And when they cross-examined it, they did find that the 3 women who were found were Joe, Michelle, and Chrissy. So of course, at this point, a full investigation is launched, and they have to eliminate the people closest to the victims first. So Hal is thoroughly looked into, and like I said, people were suspicious of him to begin with because he didn't call the police to report that his family was 3 days behind on the day that they were supposed to be back home. But also, he was just very flat when he found out about the fact that they were all killed and found floating in a bay. Like I told you in the beginning of this video, Hal was a very flat personality. He didn't get worked up about very much. He didn't wear his heart on his sleeve. He didn't show his emotions to the police when they broke the news to him. So the police were fishy of him. But based on the fact that people in the town where he lived reported that no, he was here this day, he was eating breakfast at this place this day, I saw him at the diner this day, there were enough people to corroborate his story that he never left Ohio, and he was completely innocent. So police are still doing their investigation in Florida, and they end up finding Joe's blue vehicle parked near the boat landing, the boat dock, about a mile away from the Days Inn Hotel. So of course they bring the vehicle in for evidence. They're sifting through things, and they find a bunch of brochures, maps with directions on it, and a bunch of just little things with handwriting, you know, like directions to places or maybe places that they wanted to go to. And Hal was able to give them different documents with all of the women's handwriting on them. So the police were able to confirm that nearly everything in the vehicle that had writing on it belonged to either Joe, Michelle, or Chrissy. But there was one brochure in the vehicle that had directions to the Days Inn that looked like it was written by someone else. It could not be confirmed to belong to Joe or the two girls. In addition to this, they did also find the note that Joe had written that said blue and white boat, and they assumed that this was the color, the description of the boat that they might have been dropped off of. And not only did they connect those dots, but they also assumed that the person who wrote the directions to the Days Inn was the owner of the boat and was the person who committed the murders of Joe, Michelle, and Chrissy. Some months go by and detectives are feeling discouraged but still determined to figure out who did this. And they remember Jim Capel is specifically the lead detective on this case, and he remembers that there was a report back in May by a woman named Judy Blair who said that she was raped on a boat by a man that identified himself as Dave Posner. And she said that she had gone out on a boat with him a couple times, but the second time that she went with him, he tried to pursue her, if you know what I mean. She turned him down, and he forced himself on her. He also duct taped her mouth in a similar fashion that Joe, Michelle, and Chrissy had on them. And when he was done with her, he didn't kill her, but he did like pour water on her to try to get rid of the evidence, and then he dumped her in the water and made her swim to the shore for safety. So by the time that she was able to go and get help, there was nothing left as far as DNA went anyway. But she also did shower after this before going to the police. So there was really no DNA evidence to go on to identify this Dave person that had attacked her, but she did say that he was about 5'10", 180 pounds, had sandy blonde hair, and said that he worked in some sort of aluminum business. So police are basically sure at this point that the person who attacked Judy is the same one who murdered the Rogers family, and they are just hoping that they can connect the dots with Judy's help. So they get her to help them with a composite sketch of the person who attacked her. And when I tell you they posted everywhere, they post this sketch everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere in Tampa without seeing the sketch of this man. And they were really hoping that with this, someone from the public would come forward to report that they knew who this was. But unfortunately, there were crickets. There was absolutely no one who came forward to say that they knew who this person was. So police are like, what the heck are we going to do now? And they come up with a last-ditch effort. And when I say a last-ditch effort, I mean, I don't know if this has ever worked in any other case. Maybe it has, but none that I've heard of. But they decide, remember I told you that they found the brochure with the directions to the Days Inn Hotel that looked like it didn't belong to Joe, Michelle, or Chrissy. What was special about this note is that the T's were capitalized even in the middle of words, and the Y's, there were 3 Y's written in this note, and they were all written slightly differently. So this person's handwriting was very identifiable, was a very specific and unique kind of handwriting. So they took this note and they plastered it on 5 billboards in Tampa, and were hoping that someone would recognize the handwriting of this individual, which there are very few people that I can say I know what their handwriting looks like. So this was a long shot, and they knew that this was a long shot. but it proved to be the best decision that they made in this case. A woman named Joanne Steffi called police to let them know that she believes that the person whose handwriting is on the billboards is that of a man named Oba Chandler. And she believes that this is his handwriting because she has a receipt from him that has the exact same handwriting on the receipt. And she had the receipt because Oba Chandler had been doing aluminum work for her in the past, and she just happened to hold on to that receipt. And when she gives it to police, forensics compares it with the note on the brochure in Joe's vehicle, and what do they find? It is a match. So they know that they have to go find and talk to Oba Chandler. Now, Oba Chandler only lived about a mile from the boat launch where Joe's vehicle was found, and he denied any knowledge of what happened to the women. He denied ever having them on his boat. But regardless of this, he was arrested in September of 1992, in part because of the handwriting, but also based on his phone records. So he did make calls to his wife from his boat on both nights, the night that he attacked Joe, Michelle, and Chrissy, and the night that he attacked Judy Blair. Both of those nights, there are phone records to prove that he called his wife around the same time that he was out on the bay with the women in his boat. And what he told his wife, oh my gosh, this sick individual, what he told his wife was that he was having engine issues and that he was going to take a little bit longer to come back home. But in reality, he was just assaulting women. Ugh. And Oba did in fact own a blue and white boat that, guess what this man did? He sold it, of course. He sold his boat when he realized that the police were on his case, which further made him look even more guilty. Judy Blair was brought back down to Florida to participate in a lineup to identify the man that assaulted her, and she immediately identified it to be Oba Chandler. She knew that that was him right away without hesitation. And in addition to this, they found Oba Chandler's prints on the brochure that was located inside of Joe's vehicle. Chandler's trial begins in the summer of 1994, and because his prints were found on the brochure in Joe's vehicle, he can't deny that he met them. But his defense takes the approach of saying, yes, Oba Chandler did meet the three of them, but that was it. He met them, gave them directions, and he never saw them again. He says that he never had the three of them on his boat, but that night that they went missing, he was on his boat himself. He was on the boat himself. He knew he had to tell the truth about being on the boat himself because of his phone records. And he also claims that the night that he was on the boat, he actually was having engine troubles that he told his wife about. And he tried to say that that night he called the Coast Guard for help and da-da-da-da-da. There were absolutely no records of any phone calls made to the authorities or the Coast Guard or anyone for assistance from Oba Chandler that night. Judy Blair did testify against Oba Chandler, and the prosecution tried to draw comparisons between Judy Blair's situation and the Rogers family situation, how they were both taken out on the boat, how they were both duct taped over their mouth and thrown into the water. And it was really chilling to hear the testimony from Judy Blair. But not only did she testify, his own daughter testified against him, because after this man committed the murders, he drove to Ohio. I don't know if he drove there or flew there, but he went to Ohio, which is actually ironically where he was from too. So he went to Ohio to stay with his daughter and told his daughter that he had to stay there because the police were on to him because he raped someone and killed 3 others. So he confessed outright to his own daughter, and she testified against him in court, which I'm sure was in large part the nail in the coffin. What police believe actually happened on that boat that night was that Oba Chandler got Joe, Michelle, and Chrissy out on the water. He then proceeded to tie up their hands, duct tape their mouths so they couldn't scream for help, remove their pants, and assault all of them individually in front of one another. And after this, when he was done with them, he pushed them overboard after tying a cinder block around their necks with a long rope. One by one, he pushed them off the boat. More likely than not, a mother had to see her own children drown to death, pushed into the water, knowing that they were not going to make it, or maybe even worse, the daughters had to see their mother get pushed into the water. But Oba Chandler did not kill them before he pushed them over. He did not make it a quick death. He pushed them over the edge while they were still alive. And we know this because the medical examiner found water in their lungs, which means that they died from drowning. So this man not only put them through hell on the boat, but also made them die a very painful, very torturous death. On September 29th of 1994, a jury found Oba Chandler to be guilty of the murders of the Rogers family. And November 4th of that year, the judge sentenced him to the death penalty. Every single juror on his trial voted for the death penalty. Oba Chandler maintained his sick and twisted innocence his whole entire time in prison. He even filed for appeals, but none of them luckily were granted. And he offered absolutely no words of comfort to Hal at any point throughout this whole time that he was in prison. And he finally was killed by lethal injection on November 17th of 2011 at the age of 65. Hal was present, as well as Judy Blair. And when asked if he had any words or final thoughts for the family, Oba Chandler simply said no. So this man couldn't even offer an ounce of closure for the people who loved the Rogers family so dearly. He knew that by offering no final words, no apology, no confession, even though he was going to die, he had nothing to lose. He knew that saying that he was innocent would plant that tiniest seed of doubt in the mind of Hal, and that would torture him forever. Joe, Michelle, and Chrissy were all buried in Wilshire, and about 300 people came out to pay their respects to them and also to offer their condolences to Hal. And Hal spent a long time alone after this. He dove headfirst into his farm. That was how he coped with everything, but he really did not know if he was ever going to love again. But 9 years after this terrible tragedy, he did remarry a woman named Jolene, who was also a widower herself, and he switched his farming style from dairy farming to pig farming. He has a huge farm with about 5,000 pigs on it, and he has been honest about how grappling with this loss was extremely difficult for him, but he did find the strength to love again. And he and Jolene tried to have kids of their own, but she miscarried a few times. It just never worked out. But at the end of the day, I don't think moving on to a new relationship will ever heal the scars that Hal probably still has to this day. I don't know if he's still alive. I wasn't able to find that online. If you know, please let me know. But isn't that crazy? This story is just like the craziest. Like, just telling you the story makes me emotional, because like the first time I take a vacation, I'm gonna get killed. And then for Michelle, who freaking was assaulted for years by her own uncle, and then to be so brutally assaulted again and then drowned to death. I just feel like drowning is probably one of the worst ways to go out. I know that people say, oh, burning to death or drowning is, when I hear people like, I get so uncomfortable when I hear about people dying by drowning, because that's something that you are fully conscious for and you feel everything. That's just like a very slow and painful death, and it really shows how sick and twisted this Oba Chandler character was. Apparently he had a lot of other crimes in his life, but I wanted to keep this story specifically about the Rogers family because their story is what deserves to be told, not Oba Chandler. I don't really care about him. But what's also like really creepy to me about the story, I'm just talking now, this is nothing really to do with the case. Growing up, we took vacations all of the time. Me, my mom, my sister, the three of us would take vacations all of the time. And I remember how much of a guard dog my mom was about me and my sister. Like, she did not play. I remember being young. And when I say young, I mean 11, 12 years old, grown men looking at me. And my mom standing in front of me against grown men. It is really scary out here. It's really like, and when I was young, I didn't realize it, but now looking back, I understand why my mom was so overprotective. Every parent is protective to some extent, but my mom, she did not play at all when it came to our safety, and I'm so glad that she didn't. But it's just extremely disheartening because their first vacation, and perhaps it was a little bit of being naive. You know, they didn't really leave Ohio. They probably felt like they could trust everyone in their hometown. So when they go to a new place, they probably see the best in people, saw the best in Oba Chandler. And because of that, because they were good people who thought other people were good too, they had to lose their lives. All right, y'all, I think I'm done. I made this really good smoothie, by the way. Bananas, oat milk, peanut butter, protein powder, chia seeds, and brown sugar. It's really, really good. You should try that. I'm gonna go try to have a good day and not think about this case anymore because this one really put me through it. So, but you know what I'm gonna say. If you made it this far, you are loyal, you really are, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining me today on this wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful morning, a wonderful afternoon, a wonderful evening, depending on what time it is when you watch this video. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Peace.